a lion's heart, audacity to dare and face anything. Type accomplished by these brave knights who, with the point of their sword, have written the history of France. In the time of the Crusades, he would have joined Godfrey of Bouillon in the assault on Jerusalem. Later, he would have been the equal of Gaston, Bayard, and Du Guesclin. The H.I. Rose de Châteauguay David, Lo, Laura Olivier produced by La Bibliothèque Nationale du Quebec, and Reynaud Levesque illustration, The Battle of Châteauguay, The Hero of Châteauguay by L.O., David 1883 C.M. De Salaberry, the most popular of our military glories. If Canada had belonged to France in 1800, he might have won the Marshal's baton by fighting like Lannes and Massena. A beautiful and imposing figure carved in marble, the features regular, proudly etched, a bold, aggressive forehead, a rich complexion, a blend of pink and white, bright, clear eyes sparkling with vigour, rays of sunlight in a blue sky. Broad, solid shoulders like bastions, a chest where bullets seemed to rebound, an arm that struck like Charles Martel or Richard the Lionheart, strong and flexible muscles like steel, a magnificent ensemble of force, distinction, vitality, and beauty, a powerful organism teeming with life and sap. Quick, sudden, impetuous, always ready to avenge an injury with a punch or a slash of the sabre. In the war in Africa, a war of surprises, ambushes, and glorious adventures, he would have been by Lamorisse on the walls of Constantine, and covered his valiant sword with glory from tip to hilt. Nature of a soldier, full of vigour and vivacity, loving to sing, laugh and dance as much as to fight, equally brave at the table as on the battlefield. Baron de Rottenburg called him in his letters, "My dear Marquis of Cannon Powder." However, he was also good, generous, and affectionate, never attacking first, and easily forgiving once the initial outburst had passed. Beloved by his officers and soldiers for his impartiality. This is the portrait of Lieutenant Colonel de Salaberry, this illustrious warrior of whom the French Canadians have every right to be proud. Severe in matters of discipline, and not holding back from using oaths and punishments for his voltigeurs who sang, "This is our Major whom the devil has taken hold of. Who will give us death? There's no wolf or tiger so rustic. Under the roundness of the sky there is none like him." After praising the merits and talents of those who, since the conquest, have upheld the honour and rights of their compatriots through pen and word, it is only just that I pay homage to him whose valiant sword has made us fear and respect him. The hero of Châteauguay had inherited glorious traditions. The family of Ironbury de Salaberry, originating from the Basque country in the kingdom of Navarre, had earned their noble titles on the battlefield. One of our hero's ancestors fought at Coutras, where he struck with great force. Henry of Navarre, later King of France as Henry of, noticed the terrible night at a moment when, after overthrowing numerous valiant adversaries, he spared a gendarme he had just injured. "Strength to the brave, thank you to the weak," cried the gallant Béarnais. "It's your motto. A noble motto!" The de Salaberry family is right to bear with pride on their escutcheon, for they have always been true to it and illustrated it through many brilliant actions. The grandfather, Michel de Salaberry, came to Canada in 1735 as a captain of frigate. He had a great reputation for strength and bravery. He married, in 1750, Miss Jutchero Duchesnay, daughter of the Seigneur of Beauport. He took part in the heroic struggles that ended with the cession of Canada to England. The father Louis, Ignace de Salaberry, was remarkable for his virtues, intelligence, tall and handsome stature, frankness of character, and this bodily strength which is passed down from father to son. But the recognition he owed to the Duke of Kent and the King of England could never make him betray the rights of his compatriots. He fought bravely in the ranks of the English army in 1766, and received 3 serious wounds during the course of the war. The English government rewarded his services with a half pension and several positions. When Craig wanted, in 1819, to unite the 2 Canadas with the aim of putting French Canadians under the rule of an English minority, he was one of those who opposed this plan most energetically. The noble lord had married, in the year 1718, the beautiful and distinguished Miss Hertel, and from this marriage were born 7 children, all handsome and well proportioned, 3 daughters and 4 sons, of whom the eldest became the hero of Châteauguay, the Franco. Canadians were proud of the splendour surrounding this beautiful and good family, and of the honours they received from their proud conquerors. Among all the sympathies that honoured them, none was more illustrious or benevolent than that of the Duke of Kent, father of our sovereign, Queen Victoria. And when the governor threatened him with taking away his means of existence, if he did not yield to his desires, he gave this fine reply: "You can, Sir James, take away my bread and that of my family, but never my honour." Having become Lord of Beauport, his manor was for 20 years a pleasant meeting-place, where French and English gentlemen, united by the conquest, learned to appreciate each other after having fought. The highest figures from England found their hospitality full of charm and distinction. It is known that this prince came to Canada in 1781 at the head of his regiment, and that during his stay among us he was the idol of the population. The happiest hours of his life were those spent within that family, of which he was always a faithful friend and powerful protector. The Duke of Kent was also a good prince, generous, affable, and loyal, as noble in heart as by birth. He had not set foot in the Beauport manor once when he was filled with admiration and friendship for its charming hosts. A correspondence of 23 years, from 1781 to 1804, attests to the depth and sincerity of this honourable friendship, manifested in every line by the most delicate feelings and graceful outpourings. It was through his influence that the 4 sons of Lord Salisbury Michel, Maurice, Louis, and de Ward, his godson, were able to satisfy their military inclinations by enlisting in the English army, where they all rose to prominent positions with their swords in a few short years. Of these 4 beautiful, valiant brothers, who were the pride of their family, their protector, and their countrymen, soon only the eldest remained. The other 3 died in service to England from 1809 to 1812, within a few months of each other. Maurice and Louis perished from fever under the storm-clouded sky of India, a land whose conquest and preservation cost England rivers of blood. The youngest, Edward, was killed at the head of his company beneath the walls of Badajoz. He was only 19. Just hours before the assault, under a black foreboding, he had written a letter to his protector, the Duke of Kent, thanking him for all the kindnesses he had shown to his family and to him. They were all 3 lieutenants, loved by their superiors and comrades, in arms for their courage, talents, and kind dispositions. A humble tomb was raised in honour of Maurice by his officers and soldiers near the spot where he had fallen. May time respect this glorious tomb, so that everywhere there are shining testimonials to the loyalty and bravery of the Canadian people. Tradition speaks of the sympathy that Salisbury's family found in their grief. It was a universal mourning. The Duke of Kent was not the least affected. He expressed his sorrow in moving letters, where he speaks of the fate of these poor children with all the tenderness of a father. Meanwhile, the eldest of the de Salisbury family bravely made his way through English years amid bullets and cannonballs. Death feared to break such a beautiful destiny. There was pride in the country when the Echo brought news of the successes and glory of the young Canadian. Applause followed when rumours spread about how he knew to defend the honour of his family and his homeland. A soldier at 14, he left for the West Indies at 16 as an ensign, quickly became a lieutenant and captain thanks to the constant protection of the Duke, and the admiration his fine conduct inspired in the army. He had shown, upon arriving in India, that despite his youth he would not be insulted with impunity. Here is how Mr. D. Gaspy recounts this fact. The officers of the 61st Regiment, in which Salisbury was a lieutenant, belonged to different nationalities. There were Englishmen, Prussians, Swiss, Hanoverians, and 2 Canadian French, the Lieutenant Salaberry and des Rivi-Rez. It was quite a difficult task to maintain peace among them. The Germans, in particular, were inclined to argument, excellent duelists. They made dangerous adversaries. Both displayed great skill, and the fight was long and obstinate. Salaberry was very young, his opponent, older, was a formidable champion. The first received a wound to the forehead, whose scar never faded. As he was bleeding profusely, and the blood was blocking his vision, his friends wanted to stop the fight, but he refused. After tying a handkerchief around his head, the combat resumed with even more ferocity. In the end, his opponent fell, mortally wounded, and most said he got what he deserved. This duel forever shielded Salaberry from insults. He had proven himself. One morning, Salaberry was having lunch with some of his comrades, in arms, when one of the Germans, looking at him with scorn, said, "I just sent a French-Canadian to the other world." He was referring to des Rivi-Rez, whom he had just killed in a duel. Salaberry sprang to his seat, but regaining his composure, he replied, "We'll finish lunch, and then you'll have the pleasure of sending another one." They fought, as was customary at the time, with cold steel. The War of the Indies was then being fought between England and France. Possession of Martinique and Guadeloupe was to be the prize of victory. It would cost young Salaberry, so French by origin and character, to fight against France. It would repulse him to combat the flag for which his ancestors had shed their blood. But loyalty was a duty for him, and the military career a vocation. The struggle was fierce, the battles relentless, dangers constant. Diseases devoured those that bullets spared. There came a day when of his regiment there remained but 200 men. The young lieutenant proved worthy of his chief's trust. He was made captain soon after. He learned this to his father in a letter where, speaking of the thousands of men he had seen fall around him, he added, "I believe I will be as happy as my grandfather." When General Prescott decided to abandon the last strong point of Guadeloupe, Fort Mathilde, it was to de Salaberry, then aged 16 or 17, that he entrusted the task of protecting the retreat of the year. In 1788 he is found in Ireland, a brigade major, and courting a fair and beautiful young girl who would have bound the young officer to her for life had it not been for the intervention of the Duke of Kent. The following year he became an aide, decamped to General Rottenberg and departed for Canada, where devoted relatives and friends welcomed him with transports of joy. He wrote to his protege a long letter to demonstrate that among soldiers the heart must yield to reason when they have no fortune. In 1809 he took part in the unfortunate expedition of Walcheren, which cost dearly and brought little glory to England. The French Canadians showed enthusiasm for the young officer, who, having left his country as a child, returned full of vigour, in all the splendour of glory and beauty. It was then during the bad days of Craig, an era of fanaticism and persecution, but also an era of moral and national greatness. The struggle became difficult. The energy of Baydard and Papineau could not endure any longer. But soon an alarm cry rang out everywhere. The United States had declared war on England and were preparing to invade Canada. In face of the danger, the need to gain the population's sympathy became clear. They were showered with warm greetings and concessions. To stir their enthusiasm and encourage them to take up arms, Charles Mitchell de Salaberry was appointed lieutenant colonel and tasked with organizing the Canadian voltigeurs. The French Canadians responded to England's call and enlisted under their young leader's flag. It was time, in June 1812, Americans crossed the border at 3 different points. While Brock and Schiff pushed back the Western and Central armies in glorious battles, General Dearborn marched on Montreal with 10,000 men via Saint, Jean, and Odelltown. Having found the enemy encamped on the right bank of the river Laqueuille, he resolved to dislodge them. De Salaberry ran to meet him, at the head of 400 voltigeurs, and did not even need the militia of the Montreal district, who hurried forward under the command of Colonel d'Estrembault. The rapidity of his movements and the intelligence with which he had prepared his defensive works puzzled the American general, who withdrew across the border after an unsuccessful attack, in which 1,400 of his men were driven back by a forward post consisting of a handful of voltigeurs. The campaign of 1812 was over. Sir George Prevost congratulated Lieutenant Colonel de Salaberry on his success in a general order, and paid tribute to the loyalty and courage of the militia. The French Canadians must have been surprised. It was the first time they had heard anything complimentary from representatives of the English crown. The campaign of 1813 was more serious. The Americans, ashamed of their failure, prepared to strike a great blow at Montreal, which they considered the key to the country. The defeat of Proctor in Upper Canada by General Harrison heightened their enthusiasm, and rightly threw Lower Canada into fear. The fatherland in danger needed at last a saviour, a hero, and she found him. It was Lieutenant Colonel de Salaberry. The struggle seemed at first impossible. A man of sufficient skill was needed to prevent the junction of the two American armies, and capable of supplementing numbers with prudence and valor to achieve a miracle, if necessary. The situation became critical. Two armies, each with 7,000 to 8,000 men, were marching on Montreal, one under Hampton via Lake Champlain, and the other commanded by Dearborn and Wilkinson, descending from Kingston. Against these 17,000 men, Lower Canada could only oppose 3,000 soldiers and militia. He came to the rescue, took the lead with 400 voltigeurs, encountered Hampton, overthrew his forward positions at Odelltown, and pursued him to Four Corners, where he attacked him with a handful of men and filled him with terror. After several days of marching and counter-marching, Hampton resumed his advance on October 21st, along the banks of the Châteauguay River, which de Salaberry immortalized on October 26, with a victory forever remembered. It is unnecessary to give details of this battle, so often told and celebrated in history, oratory, and poetry. Who has not felt their heart beat at the tale of this glorious struggle, where 300 Canadian French defied 7,000 Americans? Who does not know that all the honor of this victory belongs to the brave Colonel de Salaberry, that the success of our arms on this famous day was the result of his skill in arranging his forces and fortifying his position, and of the bravery he displayed during the battle? The battle lasted 4 hours. Hampton, believing he was facing an army of 10,000 men, retreated after losing 100 men killed and wounded, and hurriedly made his way back to the United States. With what enthusiasm the last survivors of that band of brave men who share with him the honor of this triumph recount the brilliant deeds of their heroic colonel. They represent him before the battle, seeking, utilizing all the resources that the terrain, the river, and the forest could offer him, making every tree, every stone a fortification, a shelter for his troops, treading on the earth to bring forth elements of victory. And when Wilkinson, who had been waiting at the foot of the Long, sought for news of the battle's outcome, learned the fatal news, he deemed it advisable to withdraw. Lower Canada was saved. What a rebuke to those who had accused this noble population of being disloyal, because they had hearts and refused to let their rights and liberties be trampled upon.
They tried for an instant. Those fools!
The Americans, discouraged, did not attempt a serious invasion during that war, which ended the following year with the Treaty of Ghent. Yes, Lower Canada was saved and retained by England through the bravery of the French Canadians. Let God take glory for tearing from Salaberry's brow the laurels so nobly won. But the applause of an entire people stifled the cries of jealousy and fanaticism. And when the battle commences, he leads his brave sharpshooters behind him, commanding the din of the battlefield with the éclat of his voice, heard everywhere at once, multiplying the number of his soldiers through the speed and accuracy of his movements, temporarily dispersing his forces and suddenly rallying them to strike at a point where they were not expected, making a trumpet sound and unleashing terrifying screams, employing 1,000 stratagems to disorient, surprise the enemy, and make him believe he was facing thousands of men, finally setting an example of courage and valor that seemed to grow with danger, daring bullets with the heroic nonchalance that had made him famous on the battlefields of Martinique and Guadeloupe. England itself declared, through the Regent Prince and the Duke of Kent, that Salaberry and his brave voltigeurs were the saviours of the country, the heroes of Châteauguay. One has seen these braves, whose loyalty had preserved England a rich colony, begging for their bread, the Châteauguay medal pinned to their chests. And after a half-century, not a stone marks the glorious battlefield where they flew his flag. Only a grave in an unknown cemetery indicates where rest the ashes of the hero of Châteauguay. Salaberry was made a companion of the Bath, and the provincial legislatures voted him their thanks. Later, in 1817, he became a legislative councillor. But this was all the reward granted to the brave colonel and his comrades in arms. It was considered enough for French Canadians. The importance of this battle has sometimes been contested, with the small number of killed and wounded given as reason, or rather pretext. But since when is the greatness of a victory measured by the amount of blood spilled? Would Salaberry have more merit if he had needlessly had his men killed? Is it not rather an incomparable title of glory to have accomplished such a brilliant deed of arms without a greater loss of blood, to have spared the lives of his brave soldiers through prudent measures? Such a position was not suited for our immortal compatriot. He had already done enough, moreover, for a government that had had the ingratitude to deprive his illustrious father of the half-pension he had so nobly earned by fighting for England. Salaberry did not have another opportunity to distinguish himself. He had attained all the ranks that England could confer upon a Catholic and Canadian French soldier. Even the protection of the Duke of Kent could not have elevated him to positions beyond the reach of mediocrity, for which the Duke of Kent congratulated him. He established his residence in Chambly, surrounded by a population that bore witness to his valour and glory during the war. He renounced military life and lived thereafter for his family, administering the seigneuries that Miss Hertel de Rouville had bestowed upon him as part of her dowry. He married this noble young woman a few months before the battle of Châteauguay, a fine alliance. Life there was joyful. During winter it was a succession of parties, walks, and legendary feasts. There was a competition to see who could do the most and best. On the river Chambly, which was called the Granary of Lower Canada, then had families distinguished by their origin or their talents, who competed for the palm of good manners, generosity, and fidelity to past traditions. It was a great joy for the tribe when the brave colonel arrived, because he was not the least bit quiet, and when it was his turn to sing or participate in an enthusiastic cotillion or a favourite reel, he did not hold back. People would set off in the morning, have dinner at Lord Jacob's, pick up friends along the way, and spend the evening at Mr. Cartier's in St. Antoine, or with Mr. Drolet, Franchery, and others. What noise! What enthusiasm! They would part regret, promising to see each other soon. Everyone admired him for his glory, and loved him for the gaiety and affability of his character. It was during one of these joyful gatherings at Mr. Hatt's in Chambly that he suddenly suffered a stroke on February 26, 1829. He died the next day without ever recovering speech, but still in full possession of his mental faculties and at peace with God, surrounded by his children, whom he had summoned to bless them. Homages of the nation to the hero of Châteauguay. Several people had sometimes expressed the opinion that a monument should be erected in memory of the hero of Châteauguay, but it is Mr. J. Oh, Dr. Galen, deceased, Charlotte, married to Mr. Hatt of Sorrel, and another one who died as a child, all tall and robust, heirs to the remarkable type of the de Salaberry family. Several grandchildren exist to perpetuate the name of this beautiful family. Montreal, September 1811. Diane, from Chambly, who deserves the honor of having forced the nation to perform a great act of reparation and recognition. As early as 1870, he had spoken of this project and expressed the hope and will to put it into execution soon. Like his father, he had 4 sons and 3 daughters whose names are as follows: Alphonse Melchior, former provincial aide, D. Camp, and deputy adjutant, general of the militia for Lower Canada, who died 4 or 5 years ago. Louis Michel, dead. Maurice, who took his own life at the age of 12 by accident. Charles Renelay Onades, dead. Herman, Mrs. His dream was to prepare everything for the centenary of General de Salaberry in 1878, or at least for the 50th anniversary of his death. But he could not seriously embark on the endeavour until January 1879. After passing through the village, the procession proceeded to the church, which had been draped in black and yellow fabrics. In the centre of the nave stood a catafalque, and an imposing obelisk adorned with patriotic inscriptions. It began with a procession featuring military delegations from numerous militia and volunteer units from Montreal and surrounding parishes, members of the clergy, students from the college and schools of the brothers, and several musical ensembles. A committee was then appointed in Chambly, and it was decided to launch the idea through a festival commemorating both the 100th anniversary of the hero of Châteauguay and the 50th anniversary of his death. This celebration took place on February 25, 1869, and it was magnificent. A requiem mass was sung with great effect by a powerful choir. The committee, energetically aided by Sir Thibault, the parish priest, had done everything to make the ceremony impressive. The obelisk stood to the left of the altar, right above the very spot where the hero's ashes rested. Mr. M. Salthead composed for the occasion the following stanzas, which were sung with effect by the students of the college, Salaberry. Stanzas to be sung for the F-Haying to February 25, 1879. In the evening there was a concert and banquet, and patriotic speeches were delivered by Honourable Boucherville, Mr. Globensky, Mr. Bernier from St. Jean, Colonel d'Orsennens, and the author of this biography. Globensky, Lord of St. Eustache, placed an immortal crown there with the following inscription: Homage from a son of a Voltiger to the hero of Châteauguay. In the afternoon, at a general committee meeting, it was decided to erect a monument to de Salaberry through a general subscription of 1 piastre per head, if he had to take up arms. The Canadian under the flags found them still charming, and the example of his heroes. Sing it, sir. From this day on, sons of soldiers, brave race, let us remember the days gone by, that history may keep their tracy, love those who have saved us. Chorus, sing of our fathers' battles, they marched straight to the enemy. Bis! Live on our soldiers, glory to Salaberry. Yes! Let each one of us prepare hand down the memory of the tales we gather on these festival days for posterity. Sing it, sir. To the victors belong the favours, these veterans who stand firm like pillars of glory. Render homages everywhere. Sing it, sir. Dion multiplied his efforts to ensure the success of the work. He wrote to everyone, went from town to town, from village to village, from door to door, begging for the monument of the hero of Châteauguay. He had to struggle hard against those who wanted the monument erected in Montreal, a city where it would have necessarily produced less effect. His opponents may have had the better reasons on their side, but as there was no one to follow him, to show such devotion and activity, he naturally prevailed, and soon there was only one voice repeating after him that Chambly should have the honour of possessing the monument as the hero's ashes. But the subscription moved slowly. Mr. Dion regretted that the monument could not be inaugurated in 1849. Meanwhile, to stimulate the zeal of the population in the Quebec district, he undertook to have a commemorative tablet erected in Beauport, at the very house where Salaberry was born. The people of Quebec responded to his call, and on June 28, 1884, the ceremony took place. His Honour, the Lieutenant Governor, presided, surrounded by notable figures and an enthusiastic crowd. A thunderous acclamation filled the air as the Lieutenant Governor removed the veil covering the commemorative marble. This marble is shaped like a shield and bears the following inscription: Strength to the strong and mercy to the weak. Here born on November 18, 1778, Charles M., de Celebre C.B., hero of Châteauguay, Chambly Committee, 27 June 1880. Finally, on August 4 of the same year, 1880, the Chambly Committee authorized Miss Diane to entrust our young and distinguished Canadian sculptor, Mr. Hybert, the execution of the projected monument, and to pay him the sum of 1,400 piastres, on condition that the work was completed by March 1841. There could not have been a better choice. Mr. Hybert has proven himself. He executed the magnificent statue of Our Lady of Lourdes under the direction of his distinguished master, Mr. Barassa. He set to work and fulfilled the conditions of his contract. In March 1841, the statue, displayed in a window on Notre Dame Street, was attracting general admiration. Here is the description that Minerve gave at that time. The statue is made of bronze. It stands 6.5 feet tall, including the base. The hero is standing, leaning on his left leg. The pose is that of a military man at rest. A calm, noble, assured attitude, without arrogance, as befits a hero. The head is straight, the gaze fixed forward as if gazing upon the battlefield. His 2 hands intersect over the hilt of the sword, whose tip rests on the base. The military cloak, fastened on the shoulders and thrown back, folds over the mouth of a cannon placed to the left. The base is of great simplicity, but very elegant in form. It belongs to the Doric style, with a shield bearing the arms of the hero's family, those of Chambly and Quebec province. Inscribed on the main face is, To the hero of Châteauguay, October 26, 1818. Below this inscription is a trophy composed of the flag of the Voltigeurs, a branch of laurel, and a crown. The monument, including statue and pedestal, will stand at 27 feet tall. Finally, on June 7, 1842, the monument's inauguration took place in Chambly. Never had this village seen, nor would it likely see, a more impressive gathering, the grandest spectacle. The Governor-General, the Marquis of Lorne, the Lieutenant-Governor T. Robertaille, several government members, a large number of military personnel, priests and deputies, representatives from our national societies, the most notable men of our society, had gathered for this beautiful celebration. Chambly, from afar, resembled an immense covered pavilion adorned with flags of green and flowers. The 65th Battalion, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Auermet, naturally arrived first on the scene with its beautiful music and officers from St. Jean Baptiste de Montreal. Almost at the same time, His Honour the Lieutenant, Governor of Quebec, and Mrs. Robertaille arrived and spent part of the morning visiting the main institutions in the area, the Hospital College, and convent the Sisters of the Congregation, where a charming address was presented to Mrs. Robertaille, who responded in equally charming terms. P. Bergeron M.P., Prefontaine M.P.P., Benno M.P., and others, around noon and a half, a splendid tea, ordered by the officers of the 65th, was served in one of the barracks rooms to the entire battalion and many guests, including Sir Hector Langevin, Honourable Messrs. Karen Messrs. Monsieur P.P. Corsol Ryan. The Sorlois was arriving with His Excellency the Governor, General and his party, including Colonel de Salaberry and Mrs. de Salaberry, Mrs. Hatt, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Lindsay, Miss and Mrs. G. Bossy, Miss de Salaberry, Colonel Duchesnay, Deputy Adjutant General for the 7th District, Captain Chatter, His Excellency's aide, D. Camp and Messrs. O. and H. de Salaberry from Captain Campbell and Mrs. Campbell, Mr. and Mrs. Russell Stevenson. Mr. Dormount, Vice President of the Society, St. John Baptist of Montreal, Colonel Brosseau of the 88th, Colonel Doherty of the 81st, Colonel Howard of the 86th, Lieutenants Thibaudot and Garneau from the Quebec Field Battery, Lieutenant Houdon from the Quebec Garrison Artillery, Colonel Crawford, Captains Lehman, Caverhill and McCorkill, and Lieutenants Hood, Crawford, and Lithgow from the 5th Royal Scots, Captain Blackrock, and Lieutenant Patterson from the 6th Fusiliers, Captains Henshaw and Davies from the Victoria Carabineers, and others whose names we cannot recall. Willett, Mayor of Chambly, read an address to His Excellence. Then the governor, escorted by the 60th Regiment at Serra, made a tour of the village and returned to Caia Frediccet, where Marquis of Lorne took his place on a raised platform beside the monument, accompanied by numerous ladies and other guests. The same spirit still exists today, and if the opportunity arose, a crowd of Canadians would follow the example of this great man, and even strive to achieve his feats. This statue reminds us of a characteristic trait of our compatriots. Content with little for himself, grandeur alone could satisfy him when it came to his homeland. Such was Salaberry's character, such is that of the Canadian of today. Dra Martel read an address, to which His Excellence replied eloquently as follows. Received. My thanks for your address, which eloquently expresses your patriotic desire to honour in a befitting manner the memory of a patriot. I am pleased to join you in commemorating the services rendered to the country by a brave soldier. We are gathered here to inaugurate a monument dedicated to the memory of a man. The note presents, the note hints, the memory of a man who justly rebel spirit of his time. It is at Chambly, near the battlefield, where he had the good fortune to display this courage, the glorious tradition of his race, that we place this statue. We do not raise this monument in a spirit of vain glory, but with the hope that the ancient virtues, preserved in the memory of all, can guide and illuminate future generations. In this beautiful country, once his home, there exists between our time and his a contrast that inevitably imposes itself on our reflections. They, too, at the hour of danger, embraced the profession of arms that was, in a sense, innate to them. 3 of them succumbed while defending the honour of this flag, which is now the symbol of our unity and liberties. These virtues shone with a bright light in that distinguished man, whose military talents made him capable of fulfilling his duty to the glory of our arms. Let us not forget, as we raise this monument, to also render to his brothers the tribute of honour they deserve. We are at peace, and we live with the great and generous people who surround us in the sweetness of a friendship and alliance that, we hope, will endure. Too often, alas, these forests sheltered even enemy armies. Now that we rejoice in the memory of the great deeds accomplished where Canadians, English, and French alike distinguished themselves, it is not necessary for me to dwell on the sorrowful events of those days, where we now see vast and fertile countryside, a country crisscrossed by our railroads, and where our rivers allow our steamboats to dock. One saw, when this heroic struggle was supported by Salaberry, Perrault, Mileux, Daly, and Duchesne, only a few acres of cultivated land amidst vast forests. They tried to defeat us, but the courage of the Canadians inspired them with this deep sense of respect, which is the solid foundation of lasting friendship. We must be happy and rejoice that our rivalries with them now exist only in the fertile arena of commerce. If Canada was so dear to the Canadians in 1812, how much more so must it be now? In our country, no party would wish to provoke revolutions or any change in government. No one has a chance of success in public life in Canada unless they first win the support of our people by loving our free institutions. Thanks to this peaceful era, the daily increase of our resources and the development of the nation's vital forces would make any war against Canada long and difficult. Therefore, they do not desire to invade our territory, and we hope such a desire will never manifest again, for nations, unless division provokes intervention, do not today interfere in their neighbours' affairs as often as they did before. So, in fact, its small population enjoyed the sweet freedoms under a constitution that was not very liberal. Now it contains within itself a great people, constantly growing, governing themselves internally, proudly enjoying the most free form of government, and having the ability, through their own representation, to benefit from the diplomatic influence of a great empire for the advantage of its trade with foreign nations. The Governor-General who, thanks to your invitation, is among you now as your representative, is, as head of the federal government, merely the first and continuous representative of the people. The Princess and I will never forget the close friendship that existed between Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, and Colonel Salisbury, a family friendship that, I hope, will not be limited to our ancestors. However, it is not only as an official representative that I am pleased to be with you today. It is a personal satisfaction for me, and it brings me joy to visit, in the company of members of the Salisbury family, the theatre of so much greatness and courage. The Princess has asked me to convey her deep interest in this ceremony. She wishes me to express her regret at not being able to join you today. She hopes, however, to admire this monument where, for the first time, the art of one of our sculptors so fittingly commemorates the loyalty, courage, and genius of a Canadian warrior. This beautiful speech in French by His Excellency was greeted with the applause it so rightfully deserved. It is befitting to pass on to future generations the eloquent words spoken during this solemn occasion by the representative of Her Majesty, to preserve this precious testimony of the valor and loyalty of the Canadians. French. His strong, resonant voice, striking presence, and the fervour with which he expressed his sentiments and thoughts had a profound effect on the crowd. Miss, having concluded his speech, His Excellency unveiled the statue amidst the cheers of the crowd, cannon fire, resounding fanfare, music, and fireworks ignited by the 65th Battalion. Colonel de Lotbiniere Harwood then delivered the ceremonial address. Harwood began as follows: "May it please your Excellency, gentlemen, there are moments in life when the heart seems to swim, like in an ocean of delight. For a long time now, the hero of Châteauguay sleeps at the bottom of his grave. No stone, no mausoleum. Not even a trace of where the cold dust of this distinguished man awaits the grand day of resurrection. I understand that I only want to speak here of the public monument, the monument erected by the nation. I am not talking about the modest mausoleum that filial piety built a few years ago in the field of long rest, the peaceful and modest cemetery of Chambly. Foreigners visiting the country, searching everywhere with their eyes for some memory of the hero of Châteauguay and seeing nothing, absolutely nothing that would reveal to them tangibly the glorious past of this illustrious man, exclaimed in their indignation, "Ungrateful Canadians, what are you doing?" Such is the present circumstance for me, Messieurs, dear compatriots and comrades, in arms. Such is the forever blessed moment when the great Canadian people, emerging as it were from its long slumber, finally rises noble and proud to render to the ashes of a distinguished dead, nay, to the saviour of his country, the honours that had been due him for too long, and whose memory, through a painful indifference, had almost been cast down into the gloomy and sad chasm of oblivion, that swift oblivion which the poet calls the second shroud of the dead.
Alice!
It is to you that one can say, it is indeed true that ingratitude is a burning wind that dries up the heart. Canadian people, you have a stain on your forehead. You will never be a great people until you have erased this stain. Allow more time to the amazed universe to repeat your address. Only regrets are seen in this world, insult is etched in metal, and a good deed is written on waves. But no, 1,000 times no. This shall not be said of my compatriots. Here is the day arrived when the Canadian people can reclaim their place among the peoples of the earth. For they have paid the first, the most sacred debt, their debt of honour, their debt of recognition. This memory of the Harther has remembered the past. Salisbury's spirit has appeared, justice is finally rendered, and thanks to heaven, now more than ever, I am proud and happy to say I am Canadian. What a beautiful sight unfolds before my eyes at this moment. Here are the leaders of the judiciary, the legislative and executive branches. There the representative of our sovereign and the lieutenant, governor of Quebec. From every corner of the country, even from abroad, people of the highest distinction have come to grace this splendid and brilliant family festival, this celebration of the young Canadian nation, a nation that heaven, in its infinite wisdom, has undoubtedly destined to play such a great role in the future of the great Canadian Confederation. Further away, the defenders of the homeland, these brave young men, with their chivalrous hearts, eagerly awaiting the opportunity to prove that the martial zeal of their ancestors still burns in the souls of their descendants. This is not the feast of a sect or a political party. It is a national feast in every sense of the word. Look, over there, that group of women, as beautiful as they are spiritual, do they not encourage these young warriors with their gaze and tell them, be grave, be great, be generous, be magnanimous, be good and faithful patriots, and you will have our hearts forever. Yes, gentlemen, we are witnessing a great, beautiful, and noble feast. An eminent writer once said about such festivities, "They are national feasts that gather around the same memory or hope the thoughts, loves, and joys of an entire people, making them like one family bound by a common sentiment and lost in a shared joy." Every festival that is linked to a well-understood memory, to a deeply felt idea, every festival has meaning for the spirit, and occurs outside after passing through the soul, is holy, august, and worthy of a nation. Myths. Harwood then read the story of the hero of Châteauguay, and concluded his speech with the following words. While contemplating this statue, the old man will tell his grandson about the exploits of the hero of Châteauguay. May heaven ensure that this moment never ceases to proclaim to all classes, conditions, and ages the grandeur and importance of the events it is destined to recall. May childhood come to learn from maternal lips the purpose and object of its erection. May the discouraged and downtrodden man, the man grappling with the struggles, setbacks, and sorrows of life, come to revive his courage through the great memories that this monument evokes. May the artisan, weary from the hard labors of the day, cast a simple glance at it. Ah! How relieved he will feel. And if ever the homeland is in danger, may the citizen come to reawaken his patriotism by gazing upon the noble features of this man who has so well served the homeland, this patron par excellence. May this statue be the last object that catches the eye of the young man from Chambly as he leaves his native soil for abroad, and may it also be the first object to which his eyes are drawn upon his happy return. Yes, this statue. Always this statue with its glorious memory. And for us, gentlemen, what do we come to learn at the foot of this statue? The love of homeland. On that day he gave them a command to love the fatherland, for the fatherland is the past, guarded by the present and handed down to the future. Car, as said a great writer, French it is God, who put the love of the fatherland in the hearts of men on a day when he commanded them to honor the tomb of their ancestors, to follow the laws given to their fathers, to defend the altar, the temple, or the tabernacle where they had prayed. Allow me, gentlemen, to conclude by crying out here, as a great French orator once did, have you reflected, gentlemen, on what patriotism was? Listen. It is the living generation watching over the ashes of the dead generation, and saying to those who will follow, loathe what we loved, honor what we honored, and let our God be forever your God. Yes, gentlemen, we have come here to learn patriotism. But for the man of the fields, the homeland is something more sensual, more real, closer to the heart. Rich or poor, it does not matter. It is the roof and the hope of his life. What he loves about the homeland is this small number of objects to which his soul is attached throughout his life. It is the home, the family, all these sensible images that have become sentiments for him. Undoubtedly, for the religious man, for the philosopher, for the statesman, the homeland comprises sublime abstractions. The homeland is the continuous succession of a human race possessing the same soil, speaking the same language, living under the same laws, and which, never dying, perfects itself by always renewing, like an immortal being that has only God before it and God after it. There is as much patriotism in the small field as in the grand domain. There is as much patriotism in the humble thatch, roofed hut covered with moss, as in the lofty and sunlit dwelling. This is why we live. This is why we die with joy when we must defend them against foreign footfalls, profanation. Mr. Dion invited to speak. spoke of the sacrifices and labour that had gone into the Salaberry monument. He could have added that without him this monument would not exist. The Marquis of Lorne then stepped forward at the front of the platform and proposed 3 cheers for the Salaberry family. It goes without saying that the crowd gave a favourable reception to this proposal. The assembly then dispersed. The Governor-General and his entourage, as well as Sir Hector Langevin and Honourable Mr. Caron, left Chambly around 4 o'clock. At 6 o'clock the banquet took place. Drumartil presided, with Lieutenant Governor Robertale to his right and Honourable Mr. Musso to his left. Several toasts were raised and patriotic speeches were delivered by the Lieutenant Governor, Honourable Mr. Musso, Honourable Mr. Eight, Mercier Member for Sainth, Mr. R. Prefontaine, Mr. Brisson, and Mr. Binochet, Member for Chambly, in response to the toast to the Lieutenant Governor of the province, His Honour Mr. Robertale delivered the following excellent speech, gentlemen. As representative of the Queen in the province of Quebec, I thank you for the toast you have just made. It is a further proof of the unshaken loyalty that French Canadians have shown in so many circumstances. This province is largely populated by French Canadians, and I am proud to be able to declare publicly that Her Majesty Queen Victoria has no more faithful province when it comes to the English flag. It is not out of forgetfulness of the past, national decline, or weakness that this is so. On the contrary, it is through reflection, reason, experience, and political acumen that we have reached this outcome. During the fall of the French government in this country, there was among the population an uncontrollable sense of unease and regret. But as the government relaxed its strictness and made wider concessions, confidence arose, rancours subsided, and little by little a new order of things was established where England showed itself more wisely liberal, and the people of this province more sympathetic. The progress was slow, but no less real. There were many steps backward, but finally, gradually, the fundamental principles of English government were introduced into our political constitution. This British constitution, which may have been at one time the most perfect in the world, has been granted to us, so to speak, piece by piece. The building was not completed for many years of work, yet the guarantees that we recorded from the beginning, the political and social rights of which we were successively possessed, were sufficient to win our affection for the crown to which we had been surrendered. Old France, the white flag, the achievements in the supreme struggle, all these glorious and cherished memories made hearts beat faster and kept minds in a state of suspicion and disaffection towards the new power. Initial administrative troubles only served to heighten this sentiment. Indeed, we are now almost entirely in charge of our own destiny. We enjoy free institutions and social security, unfortunately unknown to other countries. We grow under the protective shadow of the English flag, and we have nothing to fear, at least for the time being, from revolutions, tumults, or internal discord that plague our former homeland. We remained loyal to the new flag as we had been to the old, hoping that our future and perseverance would bring us the rights and legitimate freedoms we still lacked. We were right, gentlemen, to act thus. What is happening before our eyes today bears witness to it. The province of Quebec enjoys self-government, and no country in the world has more civil liberties than ours. It is therefore not surprising that we are faithful subjects of the English crown. The loyalty of the French Canadians has been put to the test more than once, but it was above all in 1812 that the loyalty and valor of our people were manifested with greater brilliance. After the session in 1773, the Americans encountered an insurmountable obstacle in winning over the respect of the inhabitants of this country for their oath of allegiance. It is sufficient to recall the siege of Quebec by the Congress army to convince oneself of this. Gentlemen, the name of Salaberry is for us more than a memorial of triumph. It is a symbol of this new state of affairs that, 52 years after the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, brought about an English victory for French soldiers. Since that time, as I said earlier, this movement of transformation has accelerated and intensified. We are now a great nation composed of diverse nationalities, but united by a common sentiment, love for our shared homeland. It was then that the children of Canada, French, rose spontaneously for the defence of an English colony. It was then that our brave militiamen, whose glorious remnants we can still sometimes see in our streets, rushed to the border at the call of an English governor. To repel the invaders, it was then that French impetuousness and English calm valor completed one another, as they did later under the walls of Sevastopol. It was then that we gave to the day of Caroline an immortal sister in the battle of Châteauguay, and that the name of the soldier whose memory we celebrate today, the heroic Salaberry, suddenly entered history as the most brilliant embodiment of our race's military courage and glory. It is this feeling that animated the soldiers of 1812, and it is this feeling that should rally us when it comes to the interests and renown of our country. And if ever war calls us again to the borders, if ever an enemy army advances into our countryside and threatens our cities, I am sure that another Salaberry will rise among us to lead us to another Châteauguay. Today's demonstration, this statue erected in honor of the Canadian hero, these tributes to the memory of a valiant soldier, are at once an act of justice and recognition and a profound lesson for current generations. They proclaim the value of military virtues and dedication to one's country, and cannot fail to serve as powerful encouragement for all who walk the path of arms. For several years now, serious efforts have been made to organize and mobilize military forces in this country. Well, I believe that a demonstration like the one we witnessed today is apt to yield the best results in this regard and instill in the people of this province seeds that will bear fruit for the future. I therefore consider it my duty to take advantage of this occasion to offer my warmest congratulations to the organizers and promoters of this work of national recognition. A nation glorifies itself by honoring great men, and the experience of all peoples demonstrates the historical truth that honors, paid to illustrious dead, are a fertile seed of civic virtues, devotion, and heroism. D.I. scores by Honorable Mr. Monsieur, Mr. President, Gentlemen, before responding to the toast entrusted to me, it is my duty to point out the particular and grand character of the demonstration. It has been 120 years since we came under English domination. Today we celebrate the glory of a Canadian Frenchman who immortalized himself in the defense of the English flag in 1813. The party is presided over by His Excellency, the Governor-General, the Marquis of Lorne, the direct representative of Her Majesty Queen Victoria. His generous and noble speech moved us deeply. Lieutenant Colonel Harwood, representing both races belonging to the Militia Department of Canada, demonstrated the vitality of the French race. His Excellency, the Lieutenant Governor of the province of Quebec, my friend, the Honourable Mr. Theodore Robertail, also a representative of Her Majesty, delivered a speech marked by the purest patriotism, and all this, Mr. I have been called to respond to the health of Canada, that is to say, to its future greatness and prosperity. President and gentlemen, placed under the shadow of the glorious English flag, which has always covered us with its generous and effective protection, and which bears within its folds the greatest liberty that the world has ever known, and which it bestows upon all its colonies. I infinitely thank the Centenary Committee of Salaberry for confiding this task to me, but I must say, without modesty, that I believe myself unworthy of the duty imposed on me. I do not practice false modesty. It is generally accepted in well-informed circles that politeness is not a strong suit for political men, but as I am at the beginning of my ministerial career, I would prefer not to depart from the rule. However, one may think themselves strong, powerful, or great. There are situations, scenes, and landscapes that leave you captivated and overwhelmed. It is then that a man who understands human fragility cries out for mercy. That is what I am about to do at this moment, and I shall do so without displaying either excessive modesty or vanity. Everything here speaks of history and patriotism. On one side, the monument to the great man, this new hero of the new thermopyles, whose glory we have just celebrated by bowing before the bronze that will eternalize him less than the battle of Châteauguay. I wish to speak of our future greatness, but before that, allow me to say a few words about our past. The history of the past is the sun that illuminates and guides the future. We are in Chambly, this poetic village that has today invited the beautiful surrounding countryside to celebrate the hero of Châteauguay. Chambly has often heard the sound of weapons and seen the colours of many flags. On the other, the Chambly River, the Richelieu, to which so many historical memories are attached, the Richelieu. Witness to so many heroic struggles, on the other, these beautiful and rich countryside populated by peaceful people and a strong race that has already achieved its prosperity by adhering to the great principles without which everything in the world is. As said by a great preacher, vanity and lies, and which are encapsulated in these two sacred words, religion and homeland. Located on the first road between the United States and Canada, Chambly has witnessed the passage of savage hordes and old French soldiers. It has seen the great wars against English colonies, and later the soldiers of Great Britain and the militia from 1776 and 1812. I cannot look at Chambly without thinking of these men who paid with their lives for the establishment of our country and watered the roots of Canadian, French nationality with their blood. It is this very place where we stand that saw the victors of Carillon pass by. The sites, the monuments that have witnessed the passage of great men, seem to have retained something of their presence, so vividly does their memory imprint itself upon the imagination. This is the lesson for us. How many times have we not been witnesses to failures among those who struggle to preserve the heritage won at the cost of so many sacrifices and heroism? On this national holiday, in memory of a man who covered himself with glory in defending the country, I cannot help but pay tribute to the courage of these heroic soldiers who, despite the dangers of these sad yet glorious days, despite the gloomy prospects of the future that opened before them in the darkest colours, despite the indifference of the motherland, joyfully gave their lives for a cause they believed lost. Fortunately, these souls who repulse struggle are becoming increasingly rare among us. These people of little faith sometimes doubt the future and think that the struggle is in vain. Gentlemen, frankly, I have never understood and hope never to understand these despair, and indeed these acts of cowardice. What has been done in the past will be repeated in the future. The blood of heroes is like that of martyrs. It is a fertile seed that produces more generous hearts, more virile characters that have faith in the future, and noble ambition to fulfill a civilizing mission in America. Those few Canadians, abandoned by the richest among them, crushed by defeat, alone before their victors, undertook to continue, without ungrateful France, the work of New France. And what a task, and what perspective was ever darker? Where is the secret of this strength, this confidence, this faith in the future? In the religious principle, in Catholic faith, in the intimate alliance between the people and the clergy. Allow me to repeat what I wrote 11 years ago. It is Catholicism that saved New France. In the eyes of cold calculators, what chance of future and success did they have? None. But these heroic losers had faith in their destiny, wanted to be something. Despite defeat and poverty, isolation, they became something. Why? Because they had on their side this great moral strength, without which nothing great is done in this world, the faith in their mission, the faith in themselves, the energetic will to exist, to conquer their place on the sun that shines for all. And we who are today 1 million, would it be permitted us to doubt when our ancestors numbered only 60,000 and were full of hope? Would it be permitted us to doubt the future when the politics that sought to exterminate this handful of brave people has recognized for 50 years the nothingness of its desires? Despairing today of our future would be almost a betrayal. It would at least be cowardice. To prepare the future that is our present, what giant battles have our ancestors not had to face? You know the heroic struggles of the early times in our history, wars against barbarism the savages, wars against civilization the English colonies of England. Since then, the struggle has continued. It has been said before, but it is good to repeat from time to time. It is to the heroes of 1776 and 1812, to Salisbury, and to his brave companions, that England owes the advantage and honour of having her flag in the north of America. We fought for national existence in 1776, and in 1812, when the Americans wanted to absorb us, Canadians, as faithful to England as they had been to France. Brave and intelligent soldiers like the hero, whose name unites us here, made their chests a bulwark against British power in America. It is pointless to insist on this. If the Canadians had listened to the Americans and the French in 1776 and in 1812, the English power in America would have been at an end. And our brave ancestors were then in a peculiar position. They fought for their feelings of loyalty to England, and with the aim of securing a future for their descendants, they fought on the battlefield for the honour and prestige of their victors of 1759. This future that you ask me to paint for you, our ancestors did not prepare, conquer only on the battlefields, but also in political battles. The Canadians of that time, like those of today, understood that their interest lay in remaining British subjects, just as they understood that allying with the Americans was for their nascent nationality absorption and obliteration. Descendants of a people where democratic institutions are still barely understood, our statesmen have realized what resources they could draw from the English Constitution, and they were the true founders of the parliamentary system in America. Thus, after having conceded the north of America to England, the Canadians of old have torn political freedom from the motherland and proved, against the will of the former governors, that we were equal to the circumstances, and that, since we were English subjects, we should enjoy all the privileges that this title entails. What were we in 1760, 1791, 1812, and 1837? What are we today? A vibrant, strong, and fully possessed nationality. We are untouchable in Quebec. We are strong in Ottawa. What more is needed to preserve the ground gained and contribute new pages to our history? Our ancestors fought giant battles, both on the battlefield and in the field of politics. Les Lafontaine, Les Morin, Les Cartier, Les Dorion have been the Salisbury of politics. They and others have built on solid foundations the edifice of our nationality. That is what an English governor could say about us. You as well as I know an old proverb. When we judge ourselves, we do not think highly of ourselves. Our esteemed and regretted governor, Lord Dufferin, in a speech he delivered in London in 1876 or 1877, declared that of all English colonies, British North America, French Canada, has most successfully adapted itself to representative institutions. He said more than that, and I know that our English-speaking compatriots will not be offended. He said that the French Canadians seemed to understand and practice these institutions better than the English themselves. This is the condition sine qua non of our national existence, of maintaining our privileges, and of our future development. For all is not rosy, and we still have much to achieve before becoming the great people with ambitious destinies. When we compare ourselves with others, we become prouder. But, messieurs, it is not enough to say that we have accomplished great things in the past, that we have had our heroes and days of triumph. We must not simply rest on our laurels and sleep in a false sense of security. At this moment, if we judge ourselves, we do not have much to be proud of. The principle of our freedom, the indispensable condition for the preservation of our religion and race, is the daily and constant struggle. He spoke as an English statesman, with a noble heart filled with sympathy for the French Canadians. By doing so, he has inscribed his name in the history of our best English governors and deserves our esteem, friendship, and gratitude. When compared to other populations, we realize that in certain aspects we lack many things. This would be the time to speak of the excellent response, the admirable speech given by His Excellency the Governor, General in reply to the address from Chambly. We were right to applaud him, congratulate him, and sincerely thank him. Let us return to the conditions of our salvation, if we wish to be worthy of our past and forge a future befitting us. But our faith must not be blind or inactive. We must work to imitate these great men of our past, if we do not wish to degenerate. The first condition is loyalty to tradition, patience and perseverance in labor and trials, and patriotism on the part of the people's representatives. The second condition is faith. There are two, one that I can call national faith, political faith. We must believe in the nation, believe in this firm, vibrant, convincing faith that overcomes all obstacles to ensure the present and prepare for the future. And by remembering our glorious past, that heroic past immortalized by de Salaberry, we certainly can have faith in our future. We must draw inspiration from the same faith of which they were inspired when they accomplished great things, when they established the noble traditions that they have left us. There is another, and this one is more delicate. But, gentlemen, if we wish to remain a distinct race, we must preserve in all its strength the close alliance between the people and the clergy, develop and support it. That's the important thing. Let us not forget, gentlemen, that it was this alliance which, at the height of dangers, amid all kinds of peril, saved the province of Quebec, kept it French and Catholic. But, as a public man, let me tell you what other prominent public men of state of great learning and authority, thought. The continuation of this alliance, which has been such a great help to us in the past, is also the essential condition, the guarantee of our future. This is not the place to elaborate these ideas at length. In 1878, Disraeli, the great political leader whom England still mourns, and to whom she paid a deserved tribute not long ago, gave a feast for his farmers. What did he talk about? One would perhaps imagine that he spoke to them of the affairs of the country, of the great political measures he wanted to carry out. Well, gentlemen, at the end of a speech he addressed to them, he spoke about religion. The foundation of the people's happiness, he told them, is the religious sentiment, the Christian sentiment. Well, gentlemen, I say the same to you. Our salvation lies in remaining Catholics, united with the clergy. The third condition is unceasing labor. The illustrious Bishop of Orleans, who was not only a man of genius, but also a great and holy bishop, and a great statesman, said, "Show me a people who work 8 hours a day, and I will show you the first people in the world." Work is a necessity. It is a law whose application must be exercised uninterruptedly. How to work? There are 1,000 ways to work. One must learn to work, keep up with new progress. Improved culture produces more grain, and it was right to say that the man who found a way to make 2 blades of grass grow where only one grew should be considered one of humanity's benefactors. Public men, professional men, are those who need to work most to be able to satisfy the aspirations and needs of our people and keep them on an equal footing with other nations. Another cause for the expansion of our province is colonization. But to speak of this topic with the eloquence it deserves, we would need here a curate Lebel, that man who dedicated his life to developing and promoting this great cause of colonization, which is of major importance to us. It is unnecessary to speak at length on this subject. Every day you can read articles in newspapers, brochures, etc. on this matter. Let me simply tell you that colonization is the work that will save the country. I realize a little too late, since I have finished, that the toast I was supposed to respond to is not the one I addressed. The health proposed by the President was to the prosperity, greatness, and future of Canada, and I only spoke of the prosperity, greatness, and future of the province of Quebec. However, I am not so far off topic as it may seem. The province of Quebec is starting to get better, and as I believe it will continue to improve, I responded to the health of Canada. Mr. by working to improve the situation of the province of Quebec, by improving its conditions for future progress and prosperity. We work for the general good of the whole country. It is not a defect of memory that made me forget. But in the federal system, every province forms an inseparable member of the trunk or body. If one member suffers, the whole body suffers. On the contrary, if each province is happy and prosperous, the entire federal body benefits. Monsieur replied to the toast, to the memory of the hero of Châteauguay, and concluded an eloquent address by reading the following poem composed for the occasion by Mr. Late, Fretty Chet. I. You were glorious, days of 1812, when our fathers, great hearts that beat beneath the blouse, forgetting immortal slights, under English flags, in noble cohorts, with carbines at the ready, they rushed to the borders, singing with the clarions. Our youths with smooth cheeks, men with strong hands, always ready to defend all just causes as, if to defy all powers. Always ready, these heroes, at the first alarm, to respond armed and chest uncovered, to the call of every dutier. I look at them pass, these warriors of a bygone era, conscripts whose calm, joy, and courage shame even seasoned soldiers. Where are they heading? To battle? From where do they come? From France. What do they call themselves? They call themselves bravery.
Ask Salaberry. These are the voltigeurs.
They are barely 300, but victorious in a fierce, superhuman struggle, they go pouring out their blood, sons of the fire trumpets, laughing at the projectiles, 1 against 20, inscribing alongside the thermopiles the rival name of Châteauguay. V future, greet all these brave ones. This beautiful demonstration ended with a brilliant illumination, and the thousands of people who came to Chambly in the morning returned vividly impressed by what they had seen and heard. Resolutions adopted by both houses in Quebec. Their heroism, repelling the obstacles forged for our conquerors, revived on our shores the legend of glory, which says that when God strikes hard in history, it is always by the hand of the Franks. There would be other speeches to quote, but it would be too long. Both chambers, sitting in Quebec on June 7, 1881, had the good sense to interrupt their proceedings to pay tribute to the memory of Salaberry. Quebec Legislative Council, presided over by the Honourable Mr. Ross. The session opened at 3 o'clock. Following the presentation and adoption of several reports, the Honourable Mr. Ross stated that yesterday he read in the chamber a letter of invitation from the Secretary of the Salaberry Monument Committee, requesting members of the Council to attend the great demonstration taking place today in Chambly. He did not doubt that many members of this House would have earnestly desired to be present at this beautiful ceremony honouring the great Canadian patriot, whose memory is dear to all. However, our parliamentary duties prevent us from participating and deriving pleasure from it. Under these circumstances, he deemed it appropriate to express the sentiments of the members of the Council on this occasion. For this purpose he drafted a dispatch which he intends to submit to the Chamber's approval. He considers it unnecessary to relate the history of the hero of Châteauguay, as everyone knows it. He believes that the Chamber will unanimously adopt the following proposal. He proposes that the following dispatch be immediately sent to Mr. Dian, Secretary of the Monument Committee of Salaberry, adopted. Certainly, if the members of this chamber had been able to attend the demonstration held today in Chambly, in honour of Colonel Salaberry, they would have done so with great pleasure. Ferrier supports with great pleasure the proposal of the Honourable Mr. Ross. He believes it is highly appropriate for the Legislative Council to express its vivid sympathies for the hero of Châteauguay. That the members of the Legislative Council wish to take part with all their hearts in the beautiful demonstration at Chambly, and that they cannot remain indifferent to this expression of our patriotism, celebrating the patriotism of another era. That the elite crowd assembled today around the monument of Salaberry demonstrates that great souls transcend time and space and merge into a single sentiment of loyalty and brave aspirations. Honourable Mr. The motion is carried unanimously, and the Speaker of the Council is instructed to communicate it to the Secretary in Chambly by telegraph. The sitting is adjourned. Assembly. Response from the Assembly to the invitation extended to the House to attend a ceremony inaugurating the monument dedicated to Salaberry. Chamber of the President of the Legislative Assembly. Quebec, June 7, 1881. To Mr. J. O'Dyan, Secretary of the Salaberry Monument Commission, Chambly Basin. The Legislative Assembly of the Province of Quebec acknowledges receipt of the invitation extended to it by the Salaberry Committee for the dedication ceremony of the monument erected in honor of the glorious victor of Châteauguay. The Assembly is in session and joins unanimously those participating in this celebration of Canadian patriotism. The Legislative Assembly of Quebec would be remiss if it failed to recognize that on this occasion the entire country bows not only before the fortunate soldier who triumphed for British arms, but also before the Canadian Frenchman who embodied loyalty to England on the battlefield. By the heart, Salaberry was the greatest embodiment of French loyalty in Canada. His courage and valor were undoubtedly reiterated today at Chambly. We congratulate you, Mr. President, for leading us. Arthur Turcott, President of the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Quebec. The Honourable Mr. Chapleau, I must thank the House for the response that has just been made to Mr. Dyan. Amidst our struggles and discussions, it is refreshing to honour the glories of the past. Amidst the clash of opinions, we may divide, but let us remember our ancestors, for at the heart of all our struggles, despite our apparent divisions, we strive for the same goal, the welfare of the country. We share the same sentiment, love for our homeland. The patrie has every right to be proud of those who preceded us, and their memory is dear to our hearts. To summarize my thoughts, I would say that honoring our ancestors is just the tributes we pay them are well deserved, and it is beautiful to recall the feats of our heroes. Allow me to recite the following verses that were passed to me by a friend who combines the qualities of a poet and a good patriot. After all, glory is not an empty word. Those who have died for us live on in history. History opens a vast pantheon to merit. Devoted men whose names are preserved on marble or brass, or even on a page, remain forever alive and are an inheritance for every people that believes in great futures. Yet we must among our memories gather good names, set them as examples, to elevate them further, house them in a temple, sacrifice everything there, gold and art and talent, so that the people's spirit may see it as a monument. Mr. Joly. I join the Chamber to thank you, Mr. President, for being the interpreter of the Chamber's sentiments on this occasion. The name Salaberry awakens deep sympathies. The people are happy to have their memories of this hero's exploits reminded. The history of the Canadian is summed up in these two words: loyalty and fidelity. Faithful to France, faithful to England, we have the right to inscribe these two words on our banner as the motto of the Canadian people. Monsieur Lynch, I hope that in the future, Franco, Canadian will continue to walk side by side with their British fellow citizens for the defence of the country. I hope that Canadian soil will never be profaned by foreign invasion. Mr. Ross, we will do in the future what we have done in the past, and we take from what brave Salaberry has accomplished the glory that is his due, and the glory that is ours to each of us. It is beautiful to consult our history and take example from the great deeds achieved by our predecessors. In August 1879, one read in Le Journal de Coyer, Beck under the signature of Mr. T.P. Baedad, Colonel de Salaberry, and the Hurons of Petite, Lorette. The popular movement in favor of erecting a monument to the hero of Châteauguay brings current relevance to the following fact, which was related to me a few days ago by the chief of the Hurons of Petite, Lorette. It was in 1812. Canadian youth was called to arms to defend their homeland. Moved by a sense of patriotism, and obedient to the voice of the ecclesiastical authorities, they quickly responded to the call of the English government. Furthermore, it had been decided to seek the assistance of the natives, who were still quite numerous at that time. Colonel de Salaberry personally took charge of going to Lorette to recruit the Hurons, and for this purpose a great assembly was convened. He then announced to them that their services were required, and all eagerly offered their names to fight under the English flag. Despite this declaration, 6 Hurons, including Joseph and Stanislas Vincent, demanded proudly to serve in the ranks of the Canadian voltigeurs. After consulting with military authorities, Missas de Salaberry returned to the village a few days later to announce to the Hurons that the government had decided to keep them as a reserve in case Quebec was attacked, and the Americans invaded the country via the Kenny. Beck wrote, "At the Battle of Châteauguay, where 800 Canadians achieved the remarkable feat of routing a force of 7 or 8,000 men, the Vincent brothers swam across the river to capture the fleeing soldiers who refused to surrender. But these 2 heroes, very brave and determined during the action, were not very strong on discipline, so a few days after the battle, believing themselves perfectly free, they left their service and abandoned company to return to their homes. It was a case of flagrant desertion, and according to military law, which is unyielding in this regard, they should have been punished by death. It took great influence to obtain their pardon, and on this subject, here is what Mr. de Salaberry sister wrote to his son Colonel Beauport, December 4, 1818, "My dear son, Joseph and Stanislas Vincent, of your regiment, arrived in Lorette on December 2 and came straight to me. They show true remorse and great regret for what they did. They say they well know that there are no good excuses for such folly, but nevertheless they can truly say that they did it only through bad advice, and that they would not have done so without it. The other savages told them that the men of the nations, that is to say the Indian nations, should serve only as savages and not as hired soldiers. They add that they should not have listened to these bad counsels, but that young people do not have the experience of the old. They say that since I am the father of the Hurons, and the greatest warrior that the king has, they address themselves to me with confidence to ask for their mercy. I answered them that I would immediately ask you for it, and I was convinced that you would grant it to me, because indeed true braves are always merciful towards those who submit and repent." The grateful Hurons wanted to prove their gratitude by subscribing to the Salaberry monument. End of Project Gutenberg's L'Hi Rose de Châteauguay by Laurent Olivier David. Therefore, my dear son, I pray that you forgive them with a good heart, because of their repentance and their trust in you and in me. I believe that I will be greatly responsible for this pardon, but there is another reason. The great chief has come and said that you know he holds you in high esteem, as do all the other chiefs, who have charged him to ask in their names and his own forgiveness for their young people. This nation and its chiefs hold you in great love, and admire the great warrior. Salaberry,